when I heard that President Bill Clinton and Secretary Hillary Clinton was coming today, and I think it's appropriate to say, and I'd like you to stand up. I'd like you to stand up. And honestly, there's nothing more I can say because I have a lot of respect for those two people. So thank you all for being here.
Wead is a presidential historian. He served as special assistant to the president in the George H.W. Bush White House. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Greta.
Calling out Secretary Clinton, what a good sport she was to show up.
That's right.
Some people have wanted it in the speech, but we keep replaying it, so everybody sees it anyway.
Yeah, great moment.
You know what I like most about the speech today is when he said this. I actually think this sort of represent one of the reasons why he won. He said, Americans want great schools for their children, safe neighborhoods for their families, and good jobs for themselves. These are the just and reasonable demands of a righteous public.
I thought that was great. And, there's a real hypocrisy here because all through history, the presidents have gone to private schools and sent their kids to private schools. And we finally had a president, Jimmy Carter, who said, no, we're going to send my daughter to a public school. But he changed real quick. And the Obamas were just unashamed about it. We're going to send our kids to the best school we can send them to. And isn't that a shame that a lot of kids won't get a good education?
But what are parents, even presidents, what are they to do to send their, Sidwell, which is where the Obama children went, that's a very good school. What parent wouldn't want his or her child to have the best chance?
Yes, but if you believe in public education and you believe that it's working and that you can just feed it more money and it'll work better, then you ought to support it, some would say. I like the fact that Obama sent his kids to the best school he could. I think they were great parents.
What did you think of today's speech?
I thought today's speech was him, and that's part of the charm. People don't like it, but it wasn't written by somebody else. It was written by him, and that's why they elected him. They're so tired of the phony. And I've been watching on television as people say, "Oh, it's so divisive and hateful." And someone who loves history and reads history, I'm always amused how they say this has never happened before. But when John Kennedy was elected president, there were many people who hated Kennedy, and Truman gave a press conference on television and said, I'm not coming to the Democratic National Convention in Los Angeles. They were upset over Joe Kennedy. They were upset over the mafia. They didn't like him because he was Catholic. And there were sermons on the Sunday. He was inaugurated on a Friday. There were sermons on Sunday in Southern Baptist churches saying Kennedy's the Antichrist. Nixon, his daughter's Julie was spit on. She'd walk across campus at Smith College and they spit on her. And LBJ, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? There's always been, you could call it hatred, but Jack Ford, the son of Gerald Ford, once said to me, half of the country hates my dad, half of the country loves my dad. And he says it'll always be like that with the president.
In listening to President Trump today, he gave such a specific list of things he's going to accomplish. And these are things that he's been saying on the campaign trail, and this is why people voted for him. And I think it's a little backlash against the elitism. He said he's going to make America great again, and people sort of, they wanted a change. But the things that he has proposed are very difficult. And so what happens? What happens if he doesn't do these things? These things that he's promised. They're going to be deeply disdisappointed. And this is a tough city.
That's true, and I thought the exact same thing was going through my mind. But he's a businessman. He's, his favorite preacher was Norman Vincent Peale, and he went to that church on Fifth Avenue. He's positive, and that's how businessmen have to think, different from politicians. They don't think way ahead, how's it going to work? They think, we got to think positive, we got to make this work, and I guess that's him. But the same crossed my mind, hey, lower the expectations. That's what W would tell him. You can win if you get them low enough.
EJ, one thing that I sort of like, which I think is sort of consistent with the populist approach that Donald Trump spoke about today and has on the campaign trail, is that we're not going to have as many huge inaugural balls here in Washington tonight. It does seem like he has trimmed this whole day, and it seemed a little more conservative. I don't mean politically, but at least in terms of his approach, and maybe a little bit of a signal that it's not going to be all splashy and a big deal here in Washington.
Yeah, I kind of like that too. I think we don't need a million balls and a lot of glitter. It's ironic because Trump is a guy of glitter and he's got his hotel down the street to prove it. But I'm sympathetic with that. But on Doug's point about history, and we were talking about Trump's speech versus other speeches. As Doug was talking, I was thinking of JFK in 1960, and the first line in his inaugural address was, "We observe today not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom." And Senator Blunt quoted Jefferson's famous first inaugural after a very bitter time when we didn't even know that we were going to have party succession in the country. And Jefferson got up and said, "We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists." You saw some of that spirit in that toast in a way that Trump gave to Hillary Clinton. Boy, I would have liked to see a little bit of that in the speech. Other presidents have done it in, as Doug said, very difficult times.
It's certainly true that elections, by their definition, are divisive, right? And governing is divisive. But what is unprecedented in modern times this year is that Americans have not really come behind this president during the transition period. You look back even to the election in 2000.
But aren't we at the point to sort of prove it? We've heard so many promises over the past decades, and if he does follow through on these promises, and if he improves all these things, I just think the American people are more like they don't want any promises anymore. They want to prove it.
I don't know. I think that it reflects both a more polarized time, but also his failure to reach out in the last couple months since he won the election. Actually, I think you could do things as he did on election night. On election night, Donald Trump gave a pretty conciliatory address, but he hasn't repeated that. And as a consequence, even though George W. Bush ended up with pretty good approval ratings at the time of his inauguration, not that it lasted through his presidency, this president is not going to have the advantage that there are only a few moments, I think, where presidents are able to really reach voters who didn't vote for them. This is one of them, and I feel like there's been a bit of a missed opportunity here by President Trump.
NBC's Peter Alexander is outside the White House with the Trumps inside. Peter?
Okay.
No, but we don't have. All right, so let me ask you about this. We have a vacancy in the Supreme Court. When are we getting the nomination?
In
Monday?
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
He said last week or 2 weeks ago that he was going to make that announcement in the first 2 weeks of his tenure. He put out a list of prospects during